We are back, and I have saved maybe the best for last with all of what's going on around Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. This is going to be something that I think is going to definitely interest everybody. But still here on the floor at NAB, and I have Gareth Capon with me, who is CEO of a company called Grabyo, which I can't wait for you to be able to tell us a little bit more about what it does, but his perspective on really, and I don't think many have touched on this, how broadcasters will be affected by Cambridge Analytica and that aftermath, right? So thank you so much for joining us, Gareth. So tell me first of all a little bit about Grabyo, which is, just like a fun name, and
Sure.
I'm sure there's more to it than that, right? So go for it.
Grabyo is a cloud video platform. We provide a set of tools for broadcasters and rights holders to be able to distribute video across a range of social platforms, so to Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Periscope and Instagram, but also to some of their owned and operated platforms as well. So it's a mix of live streaming, live production, clip creation, editing, but all built in the cloud, accessed via a web browser.
And how old is the company, by the way?
The company's 4 years old.
Okay.
We're headquartered in London, but we opened up office in New York. So we've got people in the east and west coast of the US now, and our first sort of commercial office in Singapore opened this year.
Great. So tell me, who are some of your customers?
Big broadcasters like Turner Sports and Univision and BuzzFeed in the US.
Okay.
In Europe, people like Sky Sports and ITV, but also sports federations, so La Liga, the Premier League, MotoGP, Wimbledon, football clubs like Real Madrid and FC Barcelona and Southampton. So we do a lot of sport, but also a number of broadcast clients globally as well.
So I'm really intrigued, by just, I guess, the implications around this. And so what is it that you have either found or what you feel that the forecast is around this? Because I think the position or the view has been, about the brand and of course the user, right? And not maybe more about that aside from obviously the policymaker around that, right? How are you seeing the whole Facebook kind of scenario impacting broadcasters and vice versa?
I think there's two things that have really happened here. The first and probably the more important change from a publisher perspective happened a couple of months ago when they made the change in newsfeed to talk about focusing Facebook's newsfeed on more meaningful human interaction. Right. So actually that had a much greater impact on publishers than possibly many of the more recent changes will have done. It was interesting for us, we actually saw an uplift in engagement for sort of tier one broadcasters and rights holders as a result of that move. Their organic reach went down, but because the content was interesting, it was high value, it was premium, people wanted to talk about it, it actually surfaced more appropriately in newsfeed. Okay. So we've seen a much better conversion rate for our customers now, particularly on things like Facebook Live, than prior to those algorithm changes. Okay. More recently, the data challenge is a slightly different one. I actually think that in many cases, most of the publishers sending video content to Facebook won't necessarily be using the data in the same way that Cambridge Analytica and some of these other sort of third-party marketing and advertising companies would have been. So actually the impact may not be as great on them as for some of the advertising-focused businesses. Where it may have an impact is some of the OTT platforms, the subscription services who are using Facebook as a customer acquisition tool. Obviously that data, that targeting information is quite important for the efficacy of their conversion rates for those types of campaigns. So I think that may be an area where there's the scope for that level of acquisition is possibly different going forward.
Interesting. So how do you see maybe some of those challenges being overcome?
Well, I think Facebook's an advertising business. They have to create a model whereby they can sell at a level of targeted advertising opportunities to brands and publishers. But what's going to change is that the control from a user perspective is going to be surfaced more appropriately, I think. I think users are now more aware of what data is on Facebook, what's being used.
Right.
And obviously we have to recognize that many of these things have been closed down for a couple of years. These are problems which were in the open graph system a few years ago. Many of those sort of loopholes around acquisition and data access are now not available on Facebook. So I think it's good from a user perspective that people have a better understanding of what their data is and how they can use it. But
definitely understood, but in terms of like the OTT providers, as you were mentioning, who are using that to kind of fish, if you will, for subscribers, if that goes away, how does that affect that part of the business, which is rather large within the ecosystem, no?
I don't think that the ability to target customers on Facebook is going to go away. I think that they are rightly putting in much stricter controls about how that data gets accessed and used. I think if you're dealing directly with Facebook, you're still going to get the opportunity to target customers and use that. And I think that from a consumer perspective, if you're getting adverts which are relevant to you, there's nothing wrong with targeted advertising. What isn't good is for that data to go via a third party to another organization that you don't have a relationship with and you haven't necessarily authorized to get access to your data. And that really, for me, is the crux of what's happening right now.
Interesting. So any thoughts on like future? Because I hear, a lot, obviously being somebody who's a digicultural trend analyst, looking at the convergence of sentiment within popular culture, emerging technology. Some people are like, it's just a blip, and others are like, this is going to change, the whole game. What do you think from your seat in the whole system?
As I say, I think that consumers are more aware now, and they will make some decisions about maybe what data they're going to share with certain platforms. There are lots of open platforms out there, Twitter and others, where people are sharing information publicly, and you'll still be able to use that from a marketing perspective. But I think that this is probably the natural cycle of what's happening on the internet. We went through this very rapid change of everything being open, everyone was giving everything away, privacy seemed to disappear. Maybe we're going to move back to a system which is possibly a lot more like it was 5-10 years ago, where people are a bit more aware of what data they are going to share with certain networks and platforms and how that's going to be used. But I actually think from a customer perspective, getting advertising which is relevant is better than getting advertising that isn't relevant. So there is definitely some value in making that data available to certain third parties if it's used in the right way.
Interesting, yes, and of course all this intersects with everybody and everything here, at NAB. So I'm really glad that you could stop by and give your perspective, because I know it's a very busy show for everybody. But yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Gareth. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura.
Have a great rest of the show.
Cheers. Thank you.
You're welcome.